Good evening to you, friends. We at Summa Audit Systems and Softwares Private Limited, along with AuditWare Systems Limited UK, bring you yet another edition of a webinar, Analytics for External Auditors Using IDEA. Now, for this, we specifically requested James from London because they have wealth of experience and we are informed by them that there is an increasing adoption of the use of data analytics within external audits in the UK and Ireland. Similar is the story in India. We find more and more chartered accountant firms using IDEA for external audits. James Loughlin, let me thank him because I think he's taken time off to speak to us, make this presentation. He's head of technical and training at AuditWare Systems Limited UK. He'll be presenting to us today. He has a wealth of experience in business processes, data analytics, business intelligence, and he has consulted a large variety of industries: banking, insurance, manufacturing, utilities, more importantly, central and local government, and also he's worked with leading and medium-sized accounting firms. I thought it important that I should point out that he has been working with leading medium-sized accounting firms in UK and Ireland. That's relevant for us. I'll not go into his profile, which has been circulated to you. So he's got a wealth of experience, and I would like to welcome him to take over and make the presentation. Before that, just one request. I would request everyone to keep their microphones muted. At the end of his presentation, Jairam will moderate the question answer session. So those who have questions may kindly put it into the chat box, and in sequence, I think it will be taken up, moderated by Jairam and taken up by James. So with that, I would request James to please start his presentation.
Okay, thank you very much, DG. Okay, so I won't go into too much in terms of my background, as DG's just done a fantastic job of introducing me there, and obviously giving some relevance to why he asked me to come and speak to you today. So why am I presenting to you today? And that's a very good question. For many years, the larger accountancy firms have been utilizing data analytics to enhance the quality of their statutory audits that they perform for their clients, as well as enabling them to be able to provide further audit assurance services that will allow these organizations to make crucial business decisions with greater confidence. And although the use of data analytics has by some been deemed to be the only relevant to the larger firms, as DG was mentioning, due to the size of their client and the respective levels of turnover, we have over the last couple of years noticed a rise in the number of accountancy firms in the UK and Ireland who are now also interested in utilising data analytics software solutions, such as IDEA. This has also coincided with a number of conversations that we've also had with auditors who've worked for the larger accountancy firms around their general adoption, lack of adoption, or even in some cases reduction of the use of data analytics, which has then led us to look at the current landscape of data analytics used by the accountancy firms and how we can better serve our customers through solutions, training, and additional materials. This has then led us to collaborate with auditors with years of experience of embedding data analytic methodologies within the larger firms in the UK to create the Analytics for External Auditors workbook, which you can see on screen here, which in our market acts as a guide to help auditors to better understand the best practice approaches and techniques needed to create the data analytic reports that will enhance the quality of the statutory audits. And that's really why I'm here presenting to you today. So DG at Summa Audit approached myself and made us aware of the fantastic ways in which they've been assisting their customers during these difficult and unprecedented times. At the moment, I'm speaking to you from my spare bedroom at home, and it's for somebody who's used to traveling around with clients, consulting and training. And account management. It's been obviously a bit of a culture shock to be locked away, but better to be safe here than at risk, and doing my part. So they've obviously been making us aware of the fantastic ways that they've been helping customers like yourselves through the use of free educational webinars. And having read this guide, DG asked us if we would take part in a presentation to discuss how IDEA and data analytics can enhance the quality of client audits and the key considerations and processes that are involved and need to be considered. And we, of course, were more than happy to assist. Now, as existing users, I'm going to try and avoid making this a conventional why data analytics presentation, and more how we are helping our customers in the UK to upskill presentation, which will hopefully give you some additional thoughts and considerations to take away to your organisations. So I've split the presentation into two key parts. The first part to discuss why we created the Data Analytics for External Auditors guide in the first place and how we're helping upskill our customers in the UK. Because I think that does bear relevance. There are many presentations that talk about why data analytics, but then don't go into the data analytics side of things. And there are many presentations that show the data analytics, but then don't sort of connect those to, well, what risks and assurances are those helping me to understand and identify and cover. So the second part of my presentation, I'm then going to make about going through some examples of IDEA being applied to general audit analytics, but with some context as well. So, what is the audit objective? What am I looking to understand? And some of the kind of the pitfalls that people fall into. Now, for some customers, obviously with the way that technology is moving, an obvious question was why we would create a guide in the first place. In the UK and Ireland, and I believe in your territory as well, we offer an app called Smart Analyzer Financials, which contains a suite of automated reports that are designed for external auditors to quickly and effectively analyze their clients' financial statements. So why would a guide be of any use or interest? Why create a guide that talks through how to manually create these types of reports when you can sell customers apps with the press of a button will automatically create trend and exception reports, especially when these apps will integrate with the client's working papers audit management software as well? Well, we never saw the guide as a replacement of the Smart Analyzer Financials package, in all honesty. Smart Analyzer is a very powerful, robust, automated reporting framework that allows users to purchase, load, and use apps that meet their specific testing requirements. And it's important to provide customers with this type of technology because, in all honesty, if we don't, we know that our competitors will. But we also understand that over time, as they become more acquainted with the benefits that data analytics can provide to their client statutory audits, customers may want to begin to ask their own questions of the financial statements when looking for misstatement and fraud. And for us, this has been key in our territory because being able to unlock the value of this data allows the audit firms to better support their clients, to help them understand how their organization is operating, and is a vital tool to help determine the best decisions for the organization's future. They may also want to use data analytics as a way to differentiate themselves from the competition, as they may wish to provide other business services and be seen as firms to go to for additional data analytics reporting, thus creating additional revenue streams. So there are competitors on the market who provide fully automated solutions, but in terms of if you want to ask your own questions or perform business assurance audits specific to a particular customer and their needs, these types of tools won't allow them to do that. So it's sort of taking a step back to spreadsheet technology. And these have been some of the key considerations that accountancy firms in the UK and Ireland have been thinking about. But as I said, they're looking at their longer term strategy. So having had these conversations with customers, we did feel that there was a knowledge gap that we needed to address. Now, I know at this stage it may be all sounding like a sales pitch, but the team at Summer Audit have made me aware that most, if not all, attendees to this webinar already have IDEA. My reason in mentioning all of this information, as I said, is to help to give relevance as to why we wrote the guide and how we assist accountancy firms, specifically around the use of data analytics to enhance their external audit services here in the UK. We know that more has to be done to help those in education and practice to understand and make use of better use of audit analytics. And audit analytics software has been around for a number of decades, and yet we still find ourselves justifying the use of analytics and explaining why it should be used, where it should be used, and how it should be used. And we find that this is for a number of key reasons. So there One of the reasons being that there have been very little changes to some of the international standards regarding the analysing of the financial statements. And this is why many firms and software sellers still only focus on looking at the general ledger. And these standards also have an impact on professional education. In some cases, audit analytics are not covered in any great depth, and data analytic modules only include basic examples using Excel, with students not correctly understanding how data analytics can enhance audit quality. And these basic examples also don't help the student to understand the granularity of a basic data analytics process. I've personally had many conversations with auditors who've started working in practice and are surprised by how much work can sometimes actually go into the data analytic part of an audit, along with the expectations from the firms that they're working for of how much they already know about audit analytics, and they feel far from prepared. They're not aware of how data analytics can help to assess risk and gain assurance, how to marry objectives to data, how to interact with customers when asking for reports and data sets. They also not know how to deal with different accounting software packages and versions, and how to work with customers that know nothing about their own software and need guidance on how to extract the relevant data. And this is all before running the analytics themselves. So many auditors have not seen enough examples to be able to translate documents that they see within the user interface of the accounting software with rows and columns extracted from the underlying tables. And what standard inbuilt reports will they need? What do all these tables relate to? And what do all these differing codes in the data mean? What do I actually need? And it's these questions, these barriers, these hurdles that actually put firms off of actually moving forward with data analytics, or to give up. So you can easily see why, if this is not covered in any great detail in education, then it can be daunting to meet these scenarios for the first time, as this may not have been the path that they chose. And I suppose that this is another reason why we're still having the conversation of why should we implement data analytics in external audit? Because the same could be said of users who've been in practice for many years. A dramatic change in approach may be uncomfortable and not of any interest. And I've heard the comment before that I'm an accountant, I'm not an analyst. But things will have to change, as students need to have a greater awareness of the client software that they will come across in practice, along with a basic understanding of relational databases. Not only that, but an awareness of the data analytics software that will assist them, and they may be expected to use in their working day. Excel is good for basic reporting, but for robust and repeatable analytics, which is protected and audited, you need specific tools. And students that need to be aware of solutions that will complement the analytics software as well. For example, data extraction tools, which will extract and create required data sets from common software and systems. Data transfer methods, which may be used to transfer data from the client to the auditor. Also visualization tools, which are very powerful and very popular with a lot of firms, that can help to better engage with the client and lead to faster and greater insights. This level of knowledge and awareness of the world of the possible can only further strengthen the auditor and any prospective firm that they work for. And companies like ourselves also have to take responsibility for the fact that the why data analytics question is still being asked as well. In regards to IDEA, we've always promoted it as a versatile tool, but may not have always provided as much targeted information as was needed. Sometimes a blank canvas can be too much of a sort of a daunting starting point. But of course, this is now changing as we provide automated apps, as I mentioned, for those that want them, as well as specific training courses, workbooks and guides, which further enhance the use of IDEA. And we're now also working with professional education providers, giving them all the materials and knowledge they need to provide to their students. But we felt we also needed to be helping existing customers. And lastly, part of the issue has to lay with the firms themselves. And the examples I give are based on experience of working with some of the audit firms in the UK and Ireland of differing sizes. For some, the cost of implementing new software can be an issue, especially if the way that they pay for other software is at a lower cost and is paid per audit. Not having the size of clients with enough turnover, they feel to warrant the use of any analytics is another key reason, and taking a risk on a new process with the potential that it might not yield a greater benefit is also a factor. And the idea of factoring time for the analytics into the audit can be a concern as well, as this will impact the profit of the audit. Not having the right in-house skills can also be an issue, for the smaller firms. Data analytics is sometimes a new discipline for auditors and can be off-putting. Due to the requirement for a change in approach to audits, and awareness of how data is stored and flows through a client's organization, and the adoption of new tools and techniques. And this could be from the perspective of the auditors who will be tasked with running the analytics, but in a lot of cases, this can also be from the perspective of the partners who will be selling the benefits of the data analytics for the audit to their clients, not knowing what those benefits are themselves and how to sell them. And initially, these can appear to be barriers to adopting data analytics, and we've heard these rationales many times. But once overcome, these tools and techniques can be applied to a variety of assurance engagements and enable auditors to manipulate a complete data set, delivering a higher quality of audit evidence with more relevant business insights and added efficiency. Now, I said that the use of data analytics has not changed that much over the last couple of decades, but there is a new and exciting future where solutions are now available or being developed. The press of a button don't just use conventional reporting techniques to aggregate and extract and even go beyond conventional statistical methods. Solutions which utilize machine learning and artificial intelligence technology. Machine learning algorithms that don't just look at numeric deviations in data sets, but also their relationship to category values such as chart of account codes, location codes, asset codes, and user codes, as well as looking at other variables such as dates and times. Then you have artificial intelligence solutions that look at data in the same way, but learn from the user how the user remediates the identified exceptions so that over time they can start to make decisions themselves. And CaseWare themselves have already developed a couple of solutions that make use of machine learning technology. So one being the standalone Outliers app, which can be used on most data sets to look for unusual trends and occurrences, which is packaged as part of an IDEA 11 subscription. And I believe that the team at Psalm Audit have already released a video on how this app will work, so I recommend having a look at that. And CaseWare have also embedded machine learning technology into their new risk-based general ledger analysis app called Exceptional Exceptions, which is a fantastic product and can also be downloaded as part of an IDEA 11 subscription. And the app itself takes a slightly different approach to the approach of the General Ledger module in the Smart Analyzer Financials app. Rather than running a list of individual exception and trend reports, Exceptional Exceptions firstly uses machine learning to profile the General Ledger file and sets a baseline for the test parameters that the app will use, such as year-end date, keyword search terms, number of account combinations in a single journal to be classified as complex, but then allows the user to make any required adjustments to these test parameters based on size of customer or sector, for example. And Exceptional Exceptions then runs a set of exception reports and machine learning tests, and after that it will then allow the users to risk score each of the reports and then aggregates all of the individual reports together so that each journal entry has been given an overall risk score and based on which of the reports it has appeared within. The app then separates the journal entries into the risk categories, allowing the user the ability to select a random sample of journals based on levels of risk. And finally, then allows the users the ability to view conventional reports, but it also creates dynamic dashboards that can be used by the auditor or shared with the client, as visualizations can be used to better understand the significance of analytics by reviewing data in a visual context, as they can help to identify key patterns, trends, and correlations within the data that might otherwise go undetected. And it achieves this by using CaseWare's new ODBC driver, which allows the user to be able to turn an IDEA project into a data source that can be referenced by other software, for example, visualization tools like Power BI. And in regards to artificial intelligence, CaseWare is also developing and releasing AI technology in the external audit space. So CaseWare are far from letting the competition and well past them by. So with all these impressive developments in new technology, an obvious question is why write a book? Surely these new apps and technologies replace books and manual data analytic techniques. And this is a thought that many auditors and firms are now considering. If you look at many of the presentations and workshops that the larger accountancy firms are running here in the UK, many of them have moved on from utilising conventional data analytic principles and are now talking about machine learning, artificial intelligence, and how they implement them as part of their audits. So for those that have no interest in learning about data analytics or employing staff that do, these advanced tools must sound ideal and a way of jumping ahead in the use of analytics. But we felt that you first need to understand the principles of business software solutions, data sets and data technologies and analytics before you can fully rely on fully automated technology. For example, a robot implemented into a manufacturing company may give the company the ability to increase efficiency and output, but there will still need to be people who oversee the technology, understand what it does and how it does it, so that if something goes wrong and is not working as intended, they can implement steps to resolve the issue. We created this guide because we wanted to put into print the data analytics process in relation to the analysing of key financial statements from an external audit perspective. The aim being that it would enable users to not only increase their idea skills, but also to give an appreciation of audit analytics and the benefits and processes involved. And as I mentioned, this guide was written in collaboration with auditors with years of experience in practice who have skills that they and we see potentially disappearing in favour of the adoption of more automated solutions. Now, I'm not saying automation is a bad thing, far from it. I'm a great advocate of it. But going back to my robot analogy, in order to be able to rely on automation, you first need to have an appreciation of what the automation is doing in the first place. Now, I'm not saying that you should buy the guide. What I'm saying is this is why we created the guide, to help people to understand what the technology is doing. And as I also previously mentioned, many firms have selected IDEA because if a client approaches them with more bespoke business assurance requirements, they want to be able to have the tools and capabilities to deliver on this work, as well as the statutory audits. So when scoping out the content of the guide, we needed to think about what was the important information that we wanted to impart to our customers, what was missing from other guides and presentations that we'd seen or our customers had seen. And from speaking with customers, we learned that many of them had felt that they had never really understood how data analytics integrated into the audit and the reality of the situation. So what is the reality of the situation? Well, first and foremost, we wanted to help to give a general understanding of why data analytics should be considered as part of any statutory audit. Many course syllabuses, presentations and guides in the past have explained that you can apply data analytics when testing the financial statements, for example, for greater efficiency, but don't always go into further detail beyond that. We then knew that we needed to list out what types of tests can be run as part of the statutory audit, but not assuming that the audience already understood why you would want to perform these tests. Even if this information was obvious to many, we wanted to include it for those that are new to the concept of applying data analytics to statutory audits, and create information that can be provided to students, new starters and experienced auditors alike. And on top of this, we needed to include some reasoning as to the purpose and objective of the audit test, which is not always made clear. And once the tests have been defined, the auditor then needs to understand what information will need to be provided by their client. So we needed to make sure that we included this information and define not only the information that the auditor would need in order to be able to run the tests, but also the description fields that they would need for context, which is a concept that's generally ignored. So for example, when looking at the general ledger, within any reports that we would request, we would ask for the journal entry information to also include the chart of accounts code to define the account the entry had been posted to. But for context, the auditor would also need the corresponding chart of account code description field to understand what the code represented. And this can be a thought process which can easily be ignored and lead to a situation of having to go back to the client more than once re-requesting reports, which again can be an area where time is lost on the audit. We needed to make sure our customers were aware that not all software that clients use to run their financial processes are the same, and some may not always hold the information needed to run certain tests that we would include in the guide, and they may need to reduce their expectations on the level of testing that can be applied to the audit because of this. And this leads me on to the next point. A big shock for many auditors new to audit testing is the reality of acquiring data from their clients. If we worked in a perfect world, all clients would use the same accounting software, such as QuickBooks, or the same enterprise resource planning software, such as SAP, and these software solutions would hold all of the same information, and all clients would understand their systems, the data they hold, and how to extract the required reports from these systems. Unfortunately, this is not always the reality of the situation, and so we wanted to give customers some of the thought processes needed when engaging with clients to request data, such as what information will I need, what are the right questions to ask, and who are the right staff to speak to, depending on the size of the client. Now, CaseWare have recently been working on assisting IDEA users with more streamlined methods of extracting data from common accounting software with the introduction of the accounting software package tool. And Audicom, one of our sister IDEA distributors, have created the SAP data extraction tool called Smart Exporter, which integrates with the Smart Analyzer Financials app to pull data from clients' SAP systems and run a suite of predefined automated audit tests against their data. But there are other ERP systems being used here in the UK. Clients have SAP, but they also have Oracle, JD Edwards, Microsoft Dynamics, and many more. And the accounting software package tool is not an exhaustive list of accounting software packages. And it currently only extracts trial balance and general ledger reports from the included packages. And we're advocating that for greater assurance and transparency that the subledgers should be analysed as well as the general ledger. Now, this is in no way a criticism of these tools. They are fantastic solutions, but we also need to be able to arm our customers with the right thought processes to be able to approach situations where these tools cannot be applied. We also wanted to talk about data formats and how to identify common pitfalls that can affect data quality and where time can be lost on the audit. Is Excel always the best file format to receive data from the client in? What other formats should the auditor consider, rather than the client or the auditor spend hours cleansing data and potentially introducing errors themselves into the reports? It is then important for our customers to understand how to use IDEA to create the final reports. What IDEA functionality, potentially in combination with other functionality, will they need to use to achieve their end testing objective? This information needs to be detailed and include screenshots to allow the auditor to understand where they will need to navigate to an IDEA to be able to replicate the steps. And as well as meeting this core objective, we found in the UK that the guide has been a great way to reinforce training that customers have already had, as well as making them aware of differing uses of IDEA, not always included in our training courses. In fact, we've also sold this guide to some of our internal audit clients as well, due to the level of detail that we've gone into. Finally, one major trend that we've seen is that although there is much information available that lists the tests that can be applied to statutory audits, they don't, as I've already mentioned, discuss the reasons why, the realities of data acquisition and the time needed to analyze the data, but they also fail to give the user any information as to how to interpret the results. And although we knew that we couldn't include all issues and trends to look for in the results, because they can be client and sector specific, we knew that we had to include some examples. So for the first release of the guide, we specifically focused on the following areas. So the general ledger, accounts receivable, accounts payable, fixed asset inventory, tax, specifically VAT testing at this stage, and some examples of revenue assurance audits that IDEA and data analytics can also add value to. Now, because there are so many presentations and materials available how substantive testing can be applied and add value to GL, AR, AP, FA and inventory audits, and plus you have Smart Analyzer financials and the exceptional exception apps I'm sure you have seen presented previously, I thought I would do something a little different and take you through some examples of how IDEA can be applied as part of a payroll audit for a client, to give you some insight into other uses of IDEA and our general approach. And within this section, I'm going to explain why data analytics are important to a payroll audit, how to determine how data analytics can assist in payroll audit testing, specifically examining examples of common audit assertions and tests relating to a payroll audit, and what client data information will be required in order to perform the example test that I'm going to go through. And finally, I'll then give you some examples of how to complete the testing objectives in IDEA. So why is data analytics important to a client's payroll audit? Payroll expenses are usually one of the largest costs in a client's profit and loss account. So therefore, it's a material transaction area to audit. And its primary risks are that the payroll value is intentionally understated, that inappropriate parties receive payments, and that employees may receive duplicate or inflated payments. Often auditors will want to perform some in-depth analytics as part of a payroll audit, and this can mean obtaining various transaction reports and master files. Data analytics will let you take these numerous reports and merge them together and ask a variety of questions to better understand issues and trends, looking at 100% of the population of the reports where possible and easily creating samples where not. For the FRC, so the Financial Reporting Council in the UK, one of their top topics for the last few years has been audit firms' adoption of data analytics to improve audit quality across the profession, which correlates with the increase of interest in IDEA from the smaller and mid-tier audit firms that we've seen over the last couple of years as well. And auditing a client's payroll is important in helping to ensure compliance with employee contributions and ensuring records are accurate and complete. With a material area such as payroll, the FRC would question any firm not taking a data analytics approach to this area. And payroll is an area where the auditor can provide greater insights back to the client. This includes testing for fraud risks, which can help minimize financial risks and provide the opportunity to correct problems proactively. Data analytics also help minimize payments to duplicate employees, payments to leavers after they've left the organization, and minimize payments that are unusual or high, for example, overtime payments or bonuses. So the first thing the auditor will need to determine is where the data analytics can assist in the audit testing process, and they must first understand what testing is required to give assurance that the payroll costs are not materially misstated. As you can see on this slide, I've added a table showing common audit assertions and tests relating to payroll. So I can make these slides available to you after this presentation if you want to read this information in a bit more detail. But a payroll audit calls attention to anything that seems unusual, and the findings can provide a real impact to the organisation. A client will be interested in data analytics that can be performed as part of a normal payroll audit, which could include, obviously not an exhaustive list, a review of the employee master file, identifying duplicates, missing entries or ghost employees, identification of internal control weaknesses, including poor data entry, issues with segregation of duties, as well as identification of where data cleansing exercise is required, identification of potential fraudulent activities or overpayments to employees, including duplicate payments, payments to employees after leaving, identifying large bonuses, allowances, etc. Employee age profiling, including identification of those working after the normal retirement age or who are less than 16, and looking at aging workforces, and reconciliation of hours recorded in the timesheet system to the hours recorded in the payroll system. And then, having identified the audit assertions and the types of tests which can be used to validate these assertions, the next stage is to identify where data analytics can be used to either enable the auditor to perform a test or carry out a test more efficiently and with a greater quality. The table on this slide contains a list of data analytics which can be completed for the various testing areas identified on the previous slide. And the main objective of the audit is to provide assurance on the accuracy and timeliness of payroll processing and the adequacy and effectiveness of internal controls related to the administration of payroll payments. And this leads us on to obviously what data will then be required. And this is, can be an absolute minefield for customers. But payroll is most commonly run either within an ERP system or on a system separate from the main accounting software. Increasingly, this system will be outsourced to a third provider, either as a payroll company or a cloud-based SaaS solution. And as a result of this, obtaining the data will generally be restricted to the client running standard reports and exporting them to Excel, CSV, or PDF files. And we work with our customers to understand how to understand where these formats may not always be the best formats to work with, and not to always accept the first thing that you're given, and to push back to try and avoid losing time on the audit. And if the auditor is already familiar with the software that the client uses to hold this information, they'll be able to guide the client through the process of extracting the required reports. Otherwise, it'll be a case of the auditor contacting companies like Summer Audit and asking the team there if they're familiar with this software and can they give any advice and assistance. And alternatively, it'll be a case of identifying individuals related to the client that can assist, and that might be staff within the finance and human resources departments. It could be a member of the IT department, or it may be that you have to speak to a third-party service provider where there may be a cost implication to the client for them creating and or running any reports. And a key planning consideration with payroll data is one of confidentiality and whether the client will allow the auditor to have access to their employees' personal data. So in the UK, due to GDPR and other security policies, the client may either refuse to provide this data or restrict access to when the auditor is physically on site. And that can have an impact on the time of the audit as well. The client may be also concerned with certain personal data being made available. For example, bank account details. The auditor will need to understand what effect not obtaining this information will have on the overall audit procedures and corresponding objectives. Now, this information will vary from client to client based on the systems that they use and the methods they use to extract the information, but it will give the auditor a good place to start. And that's where, for our training, we focus on helping users to understand what these minefields are, what these pitfalls are, and how to get around them. We try and give them the tools to be able to deal with these types of situations. Now, once the auditor has received the data from the client, it's important to then verify the quality and accuracy of the client's data. And the easiest way to achieve this, as I'm sure that you're all aware of, is by using the field statistics function to compare the totals obtained from the client and verify that they reconcile to the totals within field statistics. Field statistics can be used to easily identify any incorrect totals, unusual trends, missing values, and incorrect date periods before you apply any of your own testing logic. And it allows the auditor a great chance of identifying any issues that will cause invalid test results. So any discrepancies should be clarified with the client before proceeding further with the data analytics element of the audit. The next stage is then to prepare the data, and in some cases the client may have provided the auditor not with one single payroll transaction file for the period, but a set of monthly files that need to be merged together using the append function in IDEA. And once these files have been merged together, they may then need additional fields adding to include information that will be needed as part of the analytics. So for example, part of my analytics might require a period field. And so I can add the period field into my data in two main ways. So I can either statically add that into the file, and that might be adding it into each monthly file before I then append them together, which you can see here in the top example, or it could be that I can actually utilize part of the date to create my period. So I can use a really powerful function such as @D2C, date to character, which will extract the month and year and post that into my new field automatically. The auditor then needs to be aware that the audit reports may be structured differently, and this can be, again, a big shock, but where IDEA is really well placed to assist you in the fact that in some data sets the clients will give you, the gross and the net pay values are in separate fields, in separate columns within the data, and in some cases they're just held within an amount field where it then uses a value in another field to define what type of value that amount is. And so we can use something like a conditional statement such as an @if function to look at what that transaction type is, and based on what that value in the transaction type field is, either copy the value from the amount field or record a 0 value. And very basic, but very, very powerful. And that's one of the things that we find that our clients like about IDEA is the fact that, yes, you can achieve some of these things in IDEA, maybe not as protected, and in a lot of cases, not as quick, unless you're obviously a very advanced Excel user who's very proficient and uses it all the time. Once the data is prepared, and these, we always, when we're training and working with our clients, we always help them to focus on understand, at what point is my data ready? I've verified totals, I've looked at data quality, I've added the flags that I need into the reports, I've merged files that I need together. Now I can begin my testing. So once the data is prepared, the auditor can then begin to apply the test to the data set. So I've just put together a handful of examples here, but rather than just showing you the steps involved within IDEA, to actually give some context and relevance, audit relevance to these tests. Okay, so so that you can see what our thought process is and how we train our customers. So a common test would be to look at leavers and joiners and test a random sample of each subset to check accuracy in compliance to the organization's employment procedures. And to achieve this, they will need to use the employee master file. So you can see here that we define what the table is that we're going to need, or tables, and within those tables, what information are we going to need. And then what the objective here is. Now, in IDEA, the first step that the auditor will need to complete will be to create two separate IDEA files which hold our starters and leavers. Okay. Now, so that I could go through more information with you, I've sort of made these screenshots rather than live IDEA presentations, but hopefully you'll understand the functionality and you'll know where to find it. Simply by using the direct extraction task from the extract group on the analysis tab, we can extract any records into two separate files which meet the criteria of start date greater than and equal to the first day of the audited period, or leaving date is greater than and equal to the first day of the audited period. And then our next task is then to create our sample files, which can be achieved by using the random record sampling function in IDEA. Okay, so again, really, really useful test made easy by IDEA. Okay, so I've easily merged the files together. I've added in the fields that I require. I've used the direct extraction to extract out the records I need, and then from those two separate files, I can then randomly extract my records. The auditor can then refer the samples of the joiners and to the Human Resources Department, who will have a number of standardized processes and forms to manage the appointment of new starters. And this should include an appointment form with the relevant information, so job reference number, job title, annual salary, grade, etc. Also filed should be the contract of employment, new starter detail forms, which include NI number, bank account, and home address details. And for those individuals leaving the organisation, again, there will also be standardised methods in place, which may include submission of a letter of resignation and details of exit interview. And this information should be logged, confirming date of resignation and the last day of service. This will ensure no overpayments are made and that all IT equipment and security passes have been returned. Selecting the joiners and leavers within the audit period, the auditor can perform checks to ensure that the internal processes are working effectively, as well as potentially identifying areas for improvement. An auditor can also use IDEA to identify payroll fraud, and these instances can be detected by searching for duplicate employee records using the duplicate key detection function in IDEA. And the duplicate detection function is very powerful. In some cases, we have customers who literally just buy IDEA for this functionality. So I've got a couple of sort of basic examples, but I've also got an example here that's sort of using a bit more fuzzy functionality. I'm not sure if you're aware of the fuzzy function that was introduced into IDEA in version 10. So examples of these tests. So first test that we may look at is we might look at our sort of national insurance number, which is our social security number. Okay, so for this we can use the same test, which is called duplicate key detection in IDEA. Very simple functionality. All I need to do is provide it with the name of the key field there, which is the NI number. Now, in theory, there shouldn't be any occurrences of duplicate NI numbers. However, it is plausible that in some cases an employee could have left and rejoined, but given a different employee number. Okay, so to add to that test, just in case there are fully duplicated records, which is very unlikely there will be, you could also include the employee ID, but that depends on obviously the structure of the data. And the duplicate bank account and sort code test may highlight a ghost employee, but equally it could be a couple working at the same organisation, but with a joint bank account. So it would be important to eliminate any false positives from the results prior to any further investigation. And in this instance, you can see that IDEA then lets me use multiple fields as part of my duplicate test. But then when it comes to addresses, it becomes a little bit more complex. So unlike the previous duplicate test where the values that we're testing are simple and very standard in most cases, when you get to addresses, unless each duplicate has been typed in exactly the same way in all of the 6 fields in our data, so from the schema that I brought up previously, which listed the employee information, there were 6 fields, so address line 1 to 6 and a postcode field. So unless every single value in each of those 6 fields is identical, IDEA won't be able to identify them as duplicates if there are subtle differences. Okay, so in this situation, the auditor should consider using the fuzzy duplicate function in IDEA, as it's designed to identify and display duplicate items or where items have a high degree of similarity within the selected character field. Okay, now there is obviously I don't know the training that the guys at SAMA go through, but this is a good example here of pushing maybe some basic training, because with the fuzzy duplicate test you can only use up to 3 fields in combination as part of the fuzzy test. Now, if I want to use the entire address value, then I need to think about how IDEA can help me achieve that. So the first thing that I would do is I would create a concatenated value. Okay, so where I basically glue all of the different address lines together. I then need to consider other things that can affect my fuzzy test. So case differences, so whether the values are a combination of uppercase, lowercase, whether spaces are going to have a part to play in this as well. So you can see here, again, IDEA can help me with the at function spaces to 1 and at upper, which I nest around my concatenated value. Then within the fuzzy test, I can then provide it with this full address. So it's testing the full address for fuzzy matches. And you have a sliding scale here which controls how close the values need to be to each other for records to be matched. So for example, if you ramp it all the way down to 60%, it will find your companies and your co's and your limited and your LTDs. So when we introduced this into version 10, our customers were very excited and pleased with this new functionality. Okay, so for this next test, it could be that you're looking at potential overpayments to employees, which would be of much interest to the client. And this type of test can identify not only overpayments to employees, but it could also identify invalid payments to leavers and ghost employees as well. So the first thing that the auditor will need to do is to join the payroll transaction file, which they may have had to merge together in the first place, to the employee master file. And IDEA has the join functionality, which lets you relate files together using wizards rather than formulas. And again, powerful functionality. What we'll do here is we're going to go with the all records in the primary file option, and we're going to link together on the employee number between the two files, okay? And from this file, we can then perform two direct extractions. So two files where we, one, which is identifying any employees that were paid before their start date and any that were paid after their start date. And you might want to play around with tolerances to allow for that final payment. But a massively powerful test with only a couple of steps. Now, on some occasions, the pay period that you would be using is not always available, and the payment date isn't. And because of this, the auditor unfortunately cannot compare the pay period date with the start and leaving dates as shown above. So in this situation, the auditor needs to have the thought processes and skills needed to create a slightly more complex criteria. Okay, so I've just put a couple of examples of how this might work. Okay, so here you can see that our direct extraction would use the right of the period end date and add it to the left of the period end date and compare this to our period that we created earlier. And for paid after leaving, you can see that there's an example of how we could handle that as well. So if you want to be able to ask those more advanced questions, then it is important to understand what IDEA is doing under the hood. As I said, you do have the automation, but for those situations where the client's going to ask you additional questions or you want to ask additional questions, being capable to then ask those questions yourself is a massively powerful task. Now, obviously, any records identified will require further investigation. Those employees identified as being paid before their start date would need to be investigated to understand if the start date is incorrect due to data entry errors, or if this is a genuine overpayment. And if the payment has been recognized as a genuine overpayment, the employer by rights can deduct the overpayment from the employee's next salary payment. So the employer would, of course, need to notify the employee, and if the mistake was a substantial amount, agree a reimbursement plan. Okay, and if these payments are a result of data entry errors, because that's sometimes what you're looking at, you're not looking at fraud, you're just looking at control failures. And this will identify potential areas for improvement, including further training for payroll staff and supervisors. Payments made to employees who have left the company should be rectified as soon as they arise, as delaying reimbursement may result in difficulties in reclaiming, as the ex-employee may claim a defence to the overpayment. And in this situation, there may also be some valid payments which have been identified, and that can put users off as well, false positives. But these need to be removed and taken into account to leave you with the true positives that you then take forward and report to the client. So obviously there was only so much that I could achieve within this presentation, but obviously, and there was a lot of information. So obviously this session will be recorded, the slides will be made available to you as well. But I hope that this presentation is giving you an indication of how we're working with our clients. We're upskilling in terms of technology, and we're upskilling in terms of thought processes, because it's getting the customers to think like analysts as well, which is going to help them to differentiate themselves from their competitors. So don't forget that both External Audit and CaseWare provide a raft of materials as part of your subscriptions and contracts, and many of our users in the UK are making good use of these to upskill staff and consider forward strategy during the current lockdown. And DeepG and the team at External Audit will be more than happy to help you in your continued journey. and also to help provide further information in regards to these materials and the guides that we have written, if this is of interest to you as well. So with that in mind, I would like to thank you for your time and patience this evening, and I would now like to open the floor to any questions.
Thank you, James. That was a very insightful presentation, and we really like the payroll cases you took up towards the end. I'm sure the participants have seen a lot of value in that. One question which a couple of participants had was largely on the guide, whether the guide was available locally and is it a priced resource. So that question is something, James, which we can take up with the respective users, and they can write into us with their interest, and we'd be happy to take it up with them.
Yes, yeah, of course. Yeah, we sold the guide to CaseWare, so now it's available to all distributors around the world, and obviously they have their own agreements with their own customers. So yes.
Sure. Thank you. Is there any other question? We have about a couple of minutes before we end the webinar, and you have an opportunity to place your question on the slides which James has spoken about. We can take a question or two. Any questions from the group? So I think, James, we will probably write into you with any specific questions we get after the webinar. As of now, there are no specific questions on the chat box.
No, please do. I'll be more than happy to answer any questions that come after the event.
Wonderful. And from the team at SAMMA and from all of us online, we would be very happy to be in touch. And thank you so much for your presentation this evening, and wish you a very nice day ahead, and good wishes to everyone else on the call. Thank you.
And you.
Thank you, James. Bye. Thank you, everyone.